the world. And I like that idea a lot. I like the idea of being able to take what I've read in my own personal practice and be able to share that with a audience without having to actually kind of like go out and tell everybody about it, right? Because this is kind of like an MMO type app in the sense that you can kind of just be, you can play it solo, or you can kind of just see what other people are doing and play off of them as well. And I'll show some examples of both of those things. So, for example, let's say that we like this quote. Um, Actually, let's say that this one, right? So this one's kind of long. So let's have this read out, and then I'll show you what you can do. So let's read this.
Commonplace Bot said, in the case for books, historian and former director of the Harvard University Library Robert Darnton explains the role of commonplace books. Unlike modern readers, who follow the flow of a narrative from beginning to end, early modern Englishmen read in fits and starts and jumped from book to book. They broke texts into fragments and assembled them into new patterns by transcribing them in different sections of their notebooks. Then they reread the copies and rearranged the patterns while adding more excerpts. Reading and writing were therefore inseparable activities. They belonged to a continuous effort to make sense of things, for the world was full of signs. You could read your way through it, and by keeping an account of your readings, you made a book of your own, one stamped with your personality. 3. Building a second brain, a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
So let's say, for example, that quote was like pretty long, right? So one thing that we might want to do is TLDR that quote. And the nice thing about this is that all these buttons here have some relationship to embeddings or a large language model with like a GPT model. So if I hit this TLDR button, it'll go down here and add this request to the queue. And this is available again to anyone who kind of like comes into the server and uses this tech for themselves. So it says in the case for books, actually I could just have it speak it again.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot in the case for books. Historian Robert Darnton conveys that early modern Englishmen used to break various texts into fragments and assemble them in unique patterns in their notebooks, engaging in a continuous process of reading and writing to understand the world. This process led them to create their own personalized books, recording and interpreting the many signs of the world.
So pretty cool. Well, this is definitely shorter than the initial thing that we read through with all the footnotes and stuff like that too, actually, to kind of go in there and edit those. But we use GPT to change it into a summary. This is something that, a lot of people do with their first kind of experience with GPT is like, explain this to me like I'm five, or take this kind of page and turn it into something a little bit easier to understand. But what a lot of people kind of get stuck at right after that is that they're kind of like, okay, what data am I going to put in here? Like a lot of people use these models for transforming something that's just on the top of their head at the moment. And they don't really know where to get high quality data that will both fit inside of the context window and be able to um, be useful. So I actually have like a whole kind of like manifesto about like how it works on the GitHub, which you can click here if you're in this Discord channel. But I'm just going to continue showing off some of the abilities, and then I'm going to um, uh, actually show you how I use it in my daily reading practice, because it's actually helped me become a better both reader, kind of like conjoiner of knowledge, as it were, and it's helped me re kind of formulates the wrong term, but it's helped me kind of give my books a new life in a way that's been very exciting and helpful, and allowed me to engage deeper with my community and learn about like what's a really great way of using large language models in the future, and maybe even the potential future of kind of like uh, journaling in a way, right? And even writing. There's a whole channels list that you can see here where I can basically talk about all this later. So the first, let's just go through these books, these one by one. So we just saw TLDR. So let's do draw next. So what draw does is that this takes this quote here about commonplace books, and then it's going to turn it into an art prompt. And then that art prompt is going to be sent to DALL-E API, and then the DALL-E API generates an art piece. And these are different every single time. So we can see that this is a uh, abstract decoupage art style. But if we go right back up to the top again and we hit draw again, And we go down to the bottom. Let's get rid of this help message. We don't really need it. It's kind of getting in the way. So we're going to run this again. So now this is a futurism style of the intellectual pursuit of constructing a commonplace book. And you can see that the image that the bot generated is completely different, even though it came from the same source quote. So I use that all the time just to kind of like get a good visual representation of what I'm looking at as the quote, because it kind of like shows you a new way of kind of like looking at it, kind of like an art gallery. So then the second button here is delve. So what delve does is, again, this is doing semantic search. So if I showed you the graph of semantic search, it's basically just a giant graph of all these nodes next to each other, which isn't really helpful because it's technically a 12,000 dimension graph, or more, but it kind of gets the general idea across. So when I do delve, I'm basically saying, hey, take this exact thing and find its really close neighbors. So if I hit delve, it'll go back to the database and say, okay, what's really close to commonplacing book encyclopedias? It's going to say Google Books and Kindle, and it's from the same author. I find that it finds a lot of the same author a lot because I think that they have a similar writing style, and I think it's picking up on that, which is pretty interesting. I don't know how it's picking up on that because it's pretty subtle. But yeah, so now it says, for example, we did Google Books and Kindle, and now we have this one, which we'll just read out.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. I looked at the most underlined sections on Amazon Kindle versions of the book. I noted that people frequently underlined passages about how they could improve their lives and rarely underlined passages about how to improve the world. Don't trust your gut. Using data to get what you really want in life. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
So this is pretty telling, right? How they could improve their own lives and not underline passages about how they could change the world. Pretty interesting. So delve dives deeper into kind of like the local space, and eventually, and this doesn't always happen depending on how much I've highlighted from a particular field of study, but like if you delve for a while, eventually you'll run out and it'll say no more quotes found. And I'll just do it one more time and maybe we'll get lucky to see no more quotes found. No, we won't. So it's actually gonna, because I actually have read a lot about reading in books and writing, and you know what it means to write books and sell books and stuff like that. So that's delve. We looked at TLDR already. Share. So we just saw draw, but one thing that's interesting about these is, of course, it comes from the quote. So sometimes people are going to want to share the quote next to a nice visual. So you can hit the share button, and then that's going to add it to the queue, and we're going to see it run for a second here. And we got to wait for a second. This one takes a little bit longer. So again, here's the art prompt that it used from the quote. And then it puts it in this really nice viewport. And I've actually been sharing these on both TikTok and Twitter every day because they're really easy. As you can see, I'm just literally just clicking buttons from books that I read years ago. So these are quotes that I highlighted years ago. So I think I read this book in like 2020 or 2021. I don't even remember reading this book. I remember reading this book. This is a really good book. I think I read this in like 2021 or 2021 or 2022. So that's the share button. I use this, like I said, all the time. This is definitely kind of like the core end of my process, as it were. And then we can go back up to the original quote. And let's say, okay, so we already listened to this, but let's listen to it one more time and pay attention to it because we're going to need it in a second.
Commonplace Bot said, the great minds of the period, Milton, Bacon, Locke, were zealous believers in the memory-enhancing powers of the commonplace book. In its most customary form, commonplacing, as it was called, involved transcribing interesting or inspirational passages from one's reading, assembling a personalized encyclopedia of quotations, where good ideas come from. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
Okay, so yeah, so as we can see, it's like, okay, commonplacing is involving transcribing interesting or inspirational passages. So why are we framing this like a question? So if I hit this quiz button and we go down to the bottom again, we see that it's added another thing to our queue here. Okay, so now we have a question. So what did commonplacing involve during the period of Bacon, Milton, and Locke? We remember that it said, oh, it's like creating an encyclopedia of interesting facts. Transcribing interesting or inspirational passages, assembling a personalized encyclopedia of quotations. So this is really good for just like spaced repetition, Anki Learning, as you saw, it was like kind of a spoiler. So for example, if I go up to, um, that one's kind of long, but here we can just read it out.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. In fact, it's so rare for a book to deliver on its promise that readers will adore you for doing just that one thing. I've heard plenty of people recommend a messy but effective book by saying, listen, it's terribly written and full of typos and has a cover that appears to have been drawn by a distracted toddler, but it's got something inside that's just too important to miss. It's going to change your life. You've got to read it. Trust me. But I've never heard even a single person recommend a problem solver with the inverse argument of, this book is a real zero impact way to spend $13 and 3 hours. But you can tell that the author is super smart. The cover is gorgeous, and there's not even a single typo. You're going to love it. Write useful books. A modern approach to designing and refining recommendable nonfiction. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
Okay, so what we can see here is that basically this is the this quiz, I imagine, is going to say like, okay, what's the difference between a good book and a bad book? And should you judge a book by its cover, right? They basically are saying, hey, don't judge a book by its cover. So if I hit the quiz button, that's going to add that to the queue. And then once we get the result from the queue here, yep, what makes a book highly recommended? So we said if it's a really good book, right? So we're going to reveal the spoiler. So too important to miss that can change your life. What qualities of a book make it not enough to recommend? And this is kind of like what we just saw with like the cover and like the lack of typos and how nice it looks. Super smart, beautiful book cover, typos, cheap price. So I use that quiz a lot whenever I'm trying to remember things about a book. And then this final one is, I just added this the other day. And the thing is, I can basically just continue adding buttons. Like I keep coming up with new ideas. Um, a nicer speech bot, for example, which I'll show you in a second too, because I was working on that a little bit ago. Poetry. There's just so many options. It's pretty crazy. So if I hit this pseudocode button, this one also takes a while. It's going to generate a code block is the right term, but I'll show you what happens when it comes up because it's pretty interesting. So yeah, let's just appreciate the share. I really like, so like if you notice that this bar here next to the quote is the same color as like most of the image on the left, that's intentional. I basically averaged out the color on the left and chose the most common color to make this bar on the right, which was a lot of fun. Okay, so commonplace AR. So basically it comes up with an app idea for you. I think I found as an engineer, a lot of the time, I think that there is, I've postulated this in a recent talk that I gave about artificial intelligence and coding, where I basically made the point that I think that the that most code hasn't still been written. Like there's this like we still live in a world of zeros, which is pretty crazy because you imagine that like you see something like Google or Facebook or Twitch or YouTube or these like really big platforms, and you kind of assume that like, do you want to get some art and stuff for your channel? Hi, Kaiden. No, I'm good on that right now. I mean, I don't Twitch stream that much, actually. I kind of am a very sporadic Twitch streamer, but thank you for asking. I appreciate it. And I have a thing that generates art for me. So if I hit this draw button, it automatically generates art. Yes, hi, how's it going? From these quotes. So I've been using that a lot in my practice. But yeah, so as I was saying, is that I think that a lot of the time, a lot of people struggle to come up with app ideas and then actually turn them into code. It's that initial kind of tabula rasa for coding. And a lot of people won't really kind of think about how flexible code is as a technology because they get caught in kind of like local maxima. So here, for example, we were just saying we took this quote about commonplacing, which we're going to read out one more time for posterity.
Commonplace Bot said, the great minds of the period, Milton, Bacon, Locke,
Robot
were zealous
read.
believers in the memory-enhancing powers of the commonplace book. In its most customary form, commonplacing, as it was called, involved transcribing interesting or inspirational passages from one's reading, assembling a personalized encyclopedia of quotations. Where good ideas come from. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
It's going fine, just trying to spend my time. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I totally feel you. Some days it's just like it's evening where I'm at right now, so it's one of those times where you're just kind of like trying to find something to do before bedtime, but you just ate dinner, you know what I mean? And you kind of like trying to fill the time. I totally get it. Um, so yeah, so basically it's interesting to see how, okay, I was saying we wanted a common place that basically can build users' favorite quotes into a physically walkable place. This thing really likes making AR apps for some reason. I don't know why the model is so obsessed with that. But then you feed the apps and wander surreal landscapes, with each quote being a building or a signpost, which is pretty cool. You know what I mean? You can kind of imagine it being a mindscape. These are all kind of in the same um, area. It used Chart.js for visualization, and it's really cool because it's actually smart enough to start writing the code for you and figure out kind of what functions are going to be the things that you're going to want to do. So it's like, okay, I know you're going to need a quote class. I know you're going to need to add the quote, update the AR with your scene view. If you've ever used ARKit, this is basically a way to um, manipulate our objects in real space, and then graph them in real space too. So that's the demo of all the buttons. We kind of went through all of them. We saw draw, we saw delve, we saw TLDR, we saw share, quiz, and pseudocode. So the thing that I like to do next is that I like to do the kind of like entry point, which is called wandering. So if I type in /wander here, what that'll do is that I can hit this /wander. That's basically going to go to the database. And this is kind of like if you went into a physical library and you asked the librarian, the front desk person, like what's in this library, and they kind of just point you in a direction. They're like, oh, maybe you would like be interested in fiction, or maybe you'd be interested in historical facts. Uh, do I know the difference between car and varchar? Um, I think off the top of my head, I think car is shorter than varchar, right? In terms of like data length that it can handle or something like that. I think that sounds right. Um, but I think, are you talking about like in C, like varchar in C? Because I think that, yeah, it's for the length of the, oh, in database. Oh yeah, and like SQL. Yeah, I still think that's the same thing though, because I think it's like the same thing with like int and big int and small int. They all have like different data lengths, and I think that varchar is longer or shorter. I don't really know. I use Supabase, and whenever I'm in Supabase, I just kind of like use the biggest data field that I can get. Usually, it's not great practice, but like if you're working at the scale of tens of thousands of documents as opposed to like millions of documents, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, they are used to store data. Yeah. So yeah, I think that yeah, I think that that's what I would use them for. But anyway, so we can see here that it populates 3 questions, and these questions are actually cached in my data set. So speaking of varchar and databases, each of these quotes gets turned into a question, and then that question is actually used because people are more responsive to questions than they are to full quotes, because quotes can kind of be overwhelming. And it's nice too because it kind of like stokes curiosity. And I think that when you are doing something like a commonplace book or a journal, you really need to stay curious about what you're going to write down and what you're going to read later. Like you need to be able to come back to the data that you've placed inside of it, and use it in a way that's like pretty inspiring. So we see, let's look at these 3 questions. So when did the mass production of bronze tools begin in Eurasia? That's a pretty interesting question. What did Tien do after Kaladin snapped at him? This is from a book, a fiction book. And what happens with people with greater value gaps are under stress? So that's pretty interesting. I'm going to do the Eurasia one, and then I'm also going to do the greater value gaps, because I don't know what greater value gaps even means in this case, but I'm interested. So, because sometimes it's like it's because it's literally just reading from the quote, it doesn't really have context. So it's just kind of like coming up with a question that fits best for the situation, but it's kind of interesting. So let's start with the value gaps one. So this was the question: what happens when the value gaps are under stress? And this is what it came up with, and I'll let the model tell us what it is.
Commonplace Bot said, when under stress, people with greater values gaps also prove to have greater conflict. They frequently demonize members of other tribes rather than recognizing that those other tribes, like themselves, are simply doing what is in their self-interest in the best ways they know how. Principles for dealing with the changing world order. Why nations succeed and fail. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting, right? So basically, it's basically saying that like people will demonize members of other tribes, even though they basically do the same thing. And then we can see these other quotes here. So maybe let's do this next one, and then we'll kind of like see which one that we like to explore a bit further.
Commonplace Bot said, research shows that this feeling arises on every rung of the economic ladder. If you're working 2 minimum wage jobs to put food in your children's stomachs, there's a good chance you'll feel overstretched. But if you're better off, you'll find yourself feeling overstretched for reasons that seem, to you, no less compelling, because you have a nicer house with higher mortgage payments, or because the demands of your, interesting, well-paid, job conflict with your longing to spend time with your aging parents, or to be more involved in your children's lives, or to dedicate your life to fighting climate change. As the law professor Daniel Markovits has shown, even the winners in our achievement-obsessed culture, the ones who make it to the elite universities, then reap the highest salaries, find that their reward is the unending pressure to work with crushing intensity in order to maintain the income and status that have come to seem like prerequisites for the lives they want to lead. 4,000 weeks. Time management for mortals. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
So this is interesting because this is basically saying, I get it. So like greater values in this case actually means like they make more money and under stress, whereas like these are basically saying that the value gaps exist between the rich and the poor. So instead of like this being like exactly tribal warfare between like two hunter-gatherer tribes, this is also saying like it happens when people become stressed and make more money. So for example, this last quote, which we could just read: when wealth and value gaps are large and there's an economic downturn, it's likely that there will be a lot of conflict about how to divide the pie, which talks about like wealth inequality. So I think that that's pretty interesting. I like the kind of like the tribal warfare. So usually I'll hit delve here and then maybe delve on this one as well. So let's delve into these two and see where we end up. This principles for changing of a new world order comes up a lot because I think I highlighted a lot from it. But so the delve finished for the first one here. So let's go here. So we can see that okay, let's just do it. I'm not going to speak these out.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot, one timeless and universal truth that I saw go back as far as I studied history, since before Confucius, who lived around 500 BCE, is that those societies that draw on the widest range of people and give them responsibilities based on their merits rather than privileges are the most sustainably successful because 1. They find the best talent to do their jobs well, 2. They have diversity of perspectives, and 3. They are perceived as the fairest, which fosters social stability. Principles for dealing with the changing world order. Why nations succeed and fail. Affiliate link. Amazon.com. Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot, the bottom line is that the human mind is prepared for tribalism. Human evolution is not just the story of individuals competing with other individuals within each group. It's also the story of groups competing with other groups, sometimes violently. We are all descended from people who belonged to groups that were consistently better at winning that competition. The coddling of the American mind, how good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
Okay, so now we're starting again to like dive deeper into the tribalism theme that I was talking about a second ago, where we are talking about like how what is social stability. And social stability, I think one of the big arguments from this book, I remember when I was reading it, is that a lot of social stability is basically wealth inequality being managed correctly when a society is mature enough to be considered a society, right? Like there's a lot of things that are like too immature to be considered a society, so it doesn't really matter what governance looks like. But when a society is like stable and big and people are born into that society and have passports and everything like that, it's really important that these societies handle their countrymen well enough to make sure that they are doing jobs that fit their ability, their skill set, but also doing managing wealth inequality between the wealthiest and the poorest people. And we can kind of see that from two books here. We see it from The Coddling of the American Mind and Principles of a Changing World Order. So let's check these out, see what else it came up with.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot, those places, cities, states, and countries that have the largest wealth gaps, the largest debts, and the worst declines in incomes are most likely to have the greatest conflicts. Interestingly, those states and cities in the US that have the highest per capita income and wealth levels tend to be the states and cities that are the most indebted and have the largest wealth gaps, e.g., cities like San Francisco, Chicago, and New York City, and states like Connecticut, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey. Facing these conditions, expenditures have to be cut or more money has to be raised in some way. The next question becomes who will pay to fix them, the haves or the have-nots? Obviously, it can't be the have-nots. Expenditure cuts are most intolerable for those who are poorest, so there needs to be more taxation of people who can afford to pay more, and there is a heightened risk of some form of civil war or revolution. But when the haves realize that they will be taxed to pay for debt service and to reduce the deficits, they typically leave, causing the hollowing out process. This is currently motivating movements from some states to others in the US. If bad economic conditions occur, that hastens the process. These circumstances largely drive the tax cycle. Principles for dealing with the changing world order. Why nations succeed and fail. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
So that's pretty interesting. Again, it's kind of talking about when people are the haves instead of the have-nots, they basically become not leaders of the economy, but like their choices have a lot more weight. So when things need to be paid for, if they leave, then who's going to pay for them, right? Because they're the ones who held the money. And this kind of talks about, uh, again, like kind of like generational wealth more than anything, right? Okay, let's check out this last one here too.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. Over time, this dynamic leads to a very small percentage of the population gaining and controlling exceptionally large percentages of the total wealth and power, then becoming overextended, and then encountering bad times, which hurt those least wealthy and least powerful the hardest, which then leads to conflicts that produce revolutions and or civil wars. When these conflicts are over, a new world order is created, and the cycle begins again. Principles for dealing with the changing world order. Why nations succeed and fail. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
So as we can see here, basically this is saying that this just happens over and over, right? Like this isn't anything new. This has happened. What we saw here in Confucius with 500. That was here somewhere. What was that? Yeah, 500 BCE. Is that societies will kind of wax and wane depending on how well the members of that society fit into the society's kind of moral goals and aims. And I do remember, in this book, the author Ray Dalio spent a lot of time talking about how the U.S. is kind of in its twilight era, as it were, because it's entering a point of hyperconsumerism, as well as people just kind of becoming a little less focused on what they value the most. So usually when I like a quote, well, there's a few things that I could do. So if I like this quote here, I can hit the save button, and then it'll just DM it to me, which is pretty neat and helpful. But usually I just like the let's fucking go emoji. So if anything is really interesting to me, I hit it with the LFG, and then I'll usually go back and figure out which of those should be shared. Because again, this is supposed to kind of be like a game of discovery, right? So, I think that this one's pretty good. Like this is also one of those things too, where when you're out and about and you're kind of like hanging out with your friends and you're trying to sound smart, I think sounding smart is largely a function of having good quotes. Oh, my back. I think I effed. I think sounding smart is largely a function of knowing things. And knowing things is largely a function of remembering things. And remembering things is largely a function of being able to connect things and then retrieve them. So that was delving. This one's basically saying, okay, this is like a long historical thing. This has been going for a while. Tribalism is kind of just what we've been doing ever since we were a young little lad species. Let's delve into this human evolution tribal thing. Let's see if there's anything here for us. Okay, let's check out what it says.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. In short, as a result of our long evolution for tribal competition, the human mind readily does dichotomous, us versus them thinking. If we want to create welcoming, inclusive communities, we should be doing everything we can to turn down the tribalism and turn up the sense of common humanity. The coddling of the American mind, how good intentions and bad ideas are setting up a generation for failure. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
I love how it says tripleism.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. For most of our evolutionary history, our ancestors lived in tribes. Becoming separated from the tribe, or worse, being cast out, was a death sentence. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Meanwhile, those who collaborated and bonded with others enjoyed increased safety, mating opportunities, and access to resources. As Charles Darwin noted, in the long history of humankind, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. As a result, one of the deepest human desires is to belong, and this ancient preference exerts a powerful influence on our modern behavior. Atomic Habits, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
Now, how does it know how to say tribes, but it doesn't know how to say tribalism? That seems like bullshit. Okay, so that was fine, I guess, that quote, in short. So this is actually kind of actually written from the other direction than what you might be expecting. I remember reading this book, and basically it's saying that a lot of college campuses are actually becoming really hostile to their professor class, in favor of kind of making the students feel too welcome, but making it feel like they can't be hurt by words because students are very kind of like word sensitive, especially in college as of late. Um, so it's actually kind of saying like, don't fire your professors, which I do agree with broadly, but I also think that it's a pedigree thing, and it's college and academia has always been a signaling thing. And so it's like for colleges to act like they have a what's it called, monopoly on thought processing, I think is more of a facet of a old world order than anything. But I do think that the kind of knee jerk reaction from identity politics to take the college's kind of assets for what it represents to society, through the past couple hundred years, and just kind of like add colored people and call it better isn't also a way to do it. So I think that it's less about just adding diversity as opposed to diversity of thought, and not being immediately jumping at the throat of anyone who says anything that disagrees with you, but also realizing that a lot of college is just signaling bullshit and academia is just signaling bullshit. So people should just um, not take it less seriously, but they should realize that, of course, it's going to be like that. And these things change really slow. Science only moves one funeral at a time, after all. So that's, we talked about that one. But let's say, for example, I think I like this one. Which was this? Yeah, I like that, but I think that this one's actually better. This have and have nots. So if I go boom, and then we hit this draw button. So let's see what these look like as art. So actually, I'll hit the share button because share is better. Let's share all three of these that I hit with the crazy face. Oh no. Oh no. Oh, that's pretty cool. Contrapoodalism? What is that?
Commonplace Bot set art prompt. Save the image, it disappears in 24 hours. Create a contrapuntualism interpretation of cities experiencing financial disparity, showcasing the tension between the wealthy and the poor populations, as well as the flight response from the financially privileged in face of increasing tax burdens. Depict this contrast through the depiction of grandiose cityscapes steadily emptying out, with remnants of economic hardship and conflict looming. Image, Earl, Oidali Piprodskas Blobcore Windows.net.
Earl. Earl. Okay, so it doesn't really like reading URLs. I wish I could just turn that off so it says don't bother reading URLs. Tribal competition of human evolution. Pretty sick. Whoa. Conflict of wealth and poverty.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot art prompt. Create an abstract expressionism-inspired depiction of the conflict between wealth and poverty, featuring vivid contrasts and turbulent patterns to visually represent socio-economic imbalance and the cyclical nature of the tax cycle. Utilize rich, glossy colors for wealth and stark, gritty tones to symbolize debt and decline. Incorporate elements suggesting geographical movement to represent the shift of the haves from burdened areas. Horizontal, imagedelivery.net. Vertical, imagedelivery.net.
I can kind of see it. I can kind of see. I could definitely see the turbulent patterns and the rich glossy colors, for sure. Even maybe some gritty tones sneak in there. Like the bottom right is pretty gritty. Get gritty. So let's say that we want to remember. Wait, which one went wrong? One timeless Confucius. I wonder if it's gonna break again. These pots do go down. I'm not the uh, perfect coder, and I use AI to code for me all the time. I'm rarely even writing code these days. Diverse, harmonious society based on meritocracy and fairness. I wouldn't call it diverse. Well, I guess there's like blue, yellow guy, white guy here. The whole red one is kind of a face in the background. You can kind of see a triangle. This guy, little gray guy with the nose. Interesting. Okay, let's quiz it up for the Confucius one. And have nots. Quiz and pseudocode take the longest because they're doing the most writing and thinking. Okay, according to the quote, why are the societies that give responsibilities based on merits rather than privileges the most sustainably successful? Because they are. No, because people end up in the right jobs where they can affect society the most and make enough money. Diversity of perspectives. Okay, yeah, I missed that. And perceived is the fairest. So social perception. What philosopher dating back to 500 BCE, Confucius, drawing the widest range of people? What? I don't know. I don't know. As many different types of people in a society's process, it points to diversity and inclusion as a strength for success. Pretty linked to what we were just talking about with academia, where academia does actually do a really great job in terms of having a lot of majors that people can study in a lot of different departments. And I do think that it does well too, but there's a certain type of credentialing that happens at universities that prevents a large number of people from different backgrounds from attending the kind of pedigree of the university, which would be fine, especially when there's things like this that I built, because then people can study whatever books they want and put whatever they want in their system and kind of quiz it and draw it and have fun with their quotes. But I don't think that this isn't the equivalent to a Stanford degree, right? In terms of in the job market. What are some of the cities with high capita, but also high indebtedness and large wealth gaps? So like New York, LA, Chicago, etc. Yeah, New York City, Connecticut, kind of like the richer states in the Northeast. Why is it that the Northeast states are richer than the slave states were? I wonder if I highlighted anything about that. Let's find out. Search. Why are the northeastern states richer than the South? So one thing that's interesting is that this isn't Google, right? So it might not find anything that like matches directly. It'll try and find something that's close, but that doesn't mean that it will find something. And I think that to me is actually more emblematic of the human condition of understanding how much you know is really just a function of how much you don't know, because you don't know most things. As a matter of fact, like nobody knows most things. But if you can really kind of like see where the boundaries of your near ignorance are, as opposed to your far ignorance. So let's like qualify far ignorance being like there's just no way that you know what the earth is going to look like 1,000 years from now and what technologies people are going to be using if people are still around. Then near ignorance is kind of like um, what happens to y if I what happens to the punching machine if I punch it. I don't know what score I'm gonna get. Okay, so let's see what this says. Oh, it looks like I did highlight some stuff.
Commonplace Bot said, above all, the Northeast is where the training takes place for the brain work that drives all American manufacturing everywhere. After all, the Northeast is home to Yale, Harvard, and that most hallowed hall of nerds, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The end of the world is just the beginning. Mapping the collapse of globalization. Affiliate link, Amazon.com. Commonplace Bot said, whether because of local historical anger and angst or American departure, in the world unfolding there is no way on earth the East Asians are capable of the sort of productive cooperation necessary to enable broad-spectrum, multimodal, integrated, and peaceful manufacturing supply chains. The Northeast Asians are politically, strategically, and culturally incapable of the degree of trust required to form their own version of NAFTA, much less the kind of joint decision-making that defines the European Union. The end of the world is just the beginning. Mapping the collapse of globalization. Affiliate link, Amazon.com.
I mean, that sounds crude, but it's totally true. If you ever read any history about Northeast Asia, they fucking hate each other. They cannot stand each other. Like every single country, they just can't hang. Okay, and this is the same quote that we saw in the last one. So I guess it just comes out to brains. It would kind of make sense that the richer kind of like family, like imagine like your grandfather starts a company and then he sticks around in the Northeast after or rather comes back to the Northeast because that's where he made all his friends in college, and then his kids grow up there and they have a nice house and stuff like that. So it just kind of makes sense that even if you had a lot of manufacturing companies in the Midwest, uh the wealth, oh my god, the wealth would centralize around the wealthier schools. Let's hit the share button on this. I wonder if I get the pseudocode button too. Let's see what this looks like for code, actually. Making my way downtown. I think I want to like play with adding music to the stream, but I don't really care. Um, so that's why did it come up with this image? It says precisionism, intellectual dynamic, famed universities as the epicenters. I don't know what precisionism is, but I guess if you really want to be pedantic about it, you could say that it's like facing the top right, which is like the Northeast. But I don't think you should. Okay. Oh, don't tell me it's another AR app. Bro, this thing loves making AR apps. I know it can make more than AR apps, but it's just like whenever I even just say like, "Hey, consider an AR app," just like lightly, it's just like I'm only gonna write AR apps, bro. You don't even have any idea. But I guess it is still geographic. So let's just see what it says. Actually, I'll have it read its own description.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot app idea. Create a surreal, virtual Northeast Enlightenment Tour app that brings users on an augmented reality quest for knowledge, linking the intellectual power of Yale, Harvard, and MIT with the backbone of American manufacturing. Using geolocation, users unlock significant educational and manufacturing points across the Northeast. Their journey is guided by AI-powered holographic mentors from universities who provide insights and trivia. At manufacturing sites, they interact with AR puzzles reflecting industry-related challenges solved by brain work. Users are exposed to countless innovations born in these hallowed halls that fuel American manufacturing. Page 5.js and 3.js will be used to create the immersive 3D world. GPT-4 for generating engaging, context-aware dialogues with the AI mentors. Geolocation services handle location-based unlocking of features. React.js will be used for fluid UI/UX.
I wonder what happens if it reads code. I actually haven't tried this yet, so this will be the first time. Let's see what happens.
CommonPlaceBot replied to CommonPlaceBot.js const user location equals geolocation get current position, const nearby points of interest equals points of interest filter, point equals, get distance, point location, user location, unlock distance, nearby points of interest for each, async point
That's
equals,
miserable.
const mentor dialog equals await GPT-4 generate dialog, point mentor topic, if, point type equals university show hologram, point mentor, mentor dialog, else, show AR challenge, point challenge, mentor dialog.
Dude, all right, I'm gonna hit the pseudocode button one more time. If it's AR again, I'm going crazy sicko mode. Call me Travis Scott because I'm gonna go sicko mode. I will say, like, one of the huge things about this bot is that it's made my reading practice so much more interesting that I've felt less compelled to kind of just do other social media things. Like I still go on TikTok and YouTube and Twitter and stuff all the time. Don't get me wrong, but like, oh, don't say it. Don't you say it. Don't you say AR. Let's see what it says.
CommonPlaceBot replied to CommonPlaceBot app idea, a surreal, educational app that virtualizes the brain training process happening at notable institutions in the Northeast like Yale, Harvard, and MIT. It does this through an immersive virtual world tour, augmented reality-infused educational content, and AI-powered virtual reality brain training games that mirror the curriculum of these eminent
Whatever.
institutions. The app will be called Cyber Nerd Hall.
Okay, so this one's also geographic. I don't think I want to go down that route because we just saw a lot of AR apps. And I don't want to be in that world. Even though I do think that this is a pretty interesting historical point. Great quiz material. But let's jump into a little fiction. I'm actually reading this book right now. It's called The Way of Storms, or The Way of Kings. It's the Stormlight Archive book, book one. It's very long, but it's very good. I think Brandon Sanderson is like good at pacing. I'm not really much of a fiction reader, so it's definitely new to me to start reading fiction more seriously. But it's really great to just like, sometimes with nonfiction, you're like taking in the ideas and you're kind of like nodding along, and then you realize that you have no idea what's happening anymore. Or like you kind of just get really lost in an author's perspective and you just think about it for a while and your brain is just kind of like turning and turning and turning. And like if you're about to go to bed or something like that, that's like pretty toxic and hard. So just to like, kind of hear a story from an author, and especially when they tell it well, is really interesting. So let's listen to these quotes and see if we want to play with them or go back to wandering.
CommonPlaceBot said. He lay back down, emotions welling inside of him. He had trouble sorting through them. Kaladin. He turned, ashamed to find tears in his eyes, and saw Tien sitting on the ground behind him. How long have you been there? Cal snapped. Tien smiled, then set a rock on the ground. He climbed to his feet and hurried away, not stopping when Cal called after him. Grumbling, Cal forced himself to his feet and walked over to pick up the rock. It was another dull, ordinary stone. Tien had a habit of finding those and thinking they were incredibly precious. He had an entire collection of them back in the house. He knew where he'd found each one, and could tell you what was special about it. The Way of Kings, The Stormlight Archive, Book 1, affiliate link, Amazon.com.
So Tien really loves rocks. That's his bit. I want to come back to this in a second because I just want to show off the better voice. These are both from 11 Lives. That's not what I'm looking for. Is it this one? Yeah.
Or is it your reputation that's bothering you? But look at how soon we're all forgotten. The abyss of endless time that swallows it all. The emptiness of all those applauding hands. The people who praise us. How capricious they are, how arbitrary. And the tiny region in which it all takes place. The whole earth a point in space, and most of it uninhabited. How many people there will be to admire you, and who they are. So keep this refuge in mind, the backroads of yourself. Above all, no strain and no stress. Be straightforward. Look at things like a man, like a human being, like a citizen, like a mortal.
So that's sick. It uses Tortoise TTS. The problem is that it's like $1 bajillion to run this because I'd have to like host it on Paperspace or what's it called? Hugging Face or any of the other GPU kind of websites. And I was looking at their prices and it's like $400 a month to leave the GPUs on. We're in a complete GPU crisis right now. And you can use something called 11 Labs and you can get this kind of voice, which is also pretty cool.
Louise Brooks and Gertrude Stein were the face of once-in-a-lifetime luxury purchases, engagement rings and cars. This more prestigious line of advertising went beyond mere product sales. It also emulated the strategy of Hollywood PR departments, which worked in league with fan magazines to create an aspirational culture of celebrity glamour. This campaign marketed the movies themselves, encouraging punters to buy tickets to what looked like exciting stories starring beautiful people, but also charmed the public into following celebrity fashions. The products weren't the only thing on sale, so too was a lifestyle.
So obviously those sound way better than the Discord bot. But again, the problem is that they're so expensive in both time and actual cost. So low-key, I'm just waiting for OpenAI to create their own version of that. That's going to be at least pseudo affordable. They already did it with Whisper. So I think that them doing that with TTS would also be pretty great. Because that would be way easier than just using whatever robot I can get my hands on. But for what we're doing here, it doesn't really matter.
Commonplace Bot said. Kaladin gritted his teeth. He was tempted to try to take down the soldier behind him, grab that spear and spend his last moments ramming it through Tvlak's portly god. Why? What did it matter to Tvlak how Kaladin was treated by this army? I should never have ripped up the map, Kaladin thought. Bitterness is repaid more often than kindness. One of his father's sayings. The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. Book 1. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
When you seek revenge, dig 2 graves. Also, Brandon Sanderson loves to just make these crazy names, which are just collections of letters. Make no damn sense.
Commonplace Bot said. The youth, the one that reminded him of Tien, died during the very next bridge run. It was a bad one. The Parshendi were in position, waiting for Satis. Kaladin charged the chasm, not even flinching as men were slaughtered around him. It wasn't bravery that drove him. It wasn't even a wish that those arrows would take him and end it all. He ran. That was what he did. Like a boulder rolled down a hill, or like rain fell from the sky. They didn't have a choice. Neither did he. He wasn't a man. He was a thing. And things just did what they did. The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. Book 1. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
But goddamn, does he have a way with words? That was a very pretty statement. So which one do we like the most? The one about his brother finding rocks, his relationship with his father, or his experience as a bridgeman? I think I like this one the most. So we're just going to delve into this. See where we end up.
Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. Arrows zipped past Kaladin, killing the other 2 men in the front line with him. Several other arrows smacked into the wood around him, one slicing open the skin of his cheek. He screamed, in horror, in shock, in pain, in sheer bewilderment. Never before had he felt so powerless in a battle. He'd charged enemy fortifications. He'd run beneath waves of arrows, but he'd always felt a measure of control. He'd had his spear. He'd had his shield. He could fight back. Not this time. The bridge crews were like hogs running to the slaughter. The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. Book 1. Affiliate link. Amazon.com. Commonplace Bot replied to Commonplace Bot. Kaladin walked back to Bridge 4's small barrack, pulling open the thick wooden door. The men huddled inside, just as he'd left them. But something had changed. Had they always looked that pathetic? Yes, they had. Kaladin was the one who had changed, not they. He felt a strange dislocation, as if he'd allowed himself to forget, if only in part, the last 9 months. He reached back across time, studying the man he had been, the man who'd still fought, and fought well. He couldn't be that man again. He couldn't erase the scars, but he could learn from that man, as a new squad leader learned from the victorious generals of the past. Kaladin Stormblast was dead, but Kaladin Bridgman was of the same blood, a descendant with potential. The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. Book 1. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
So obviously a lot happened from here to here. And you got to read the book to find out. But I think that there's a few interesting takeaways here that are generalizable to the human condition. One being, things do what they do. They did what they did. Like a rock just keeps running. So I like that. So let's share that. That one's pretty cool. And then, this is kind of like him saying that he lost again all of his control, which is pretty cool. And then after losing control, he realized that you can kind of become empty and change the person that you are, and become a new person in that person's stead. So I think it's pretty interesting to say, let's take a quiz on this one, and let's take a quiz on the other one too, just to remember the ideas. Interesting art choice. Embattled warrior. Raw inevitability of nature. I'll just have it read it.
CommonPlaceBot replied to CommonPlaceBot art prompt. Create an abstract cubist rendition of an embattled warrior, symbolizing a sense of inevitability and relentless movement. The style should be reminiscent of both the raw inevitability of nature and the harsh reality of warfare. This artwork should incorporate elements such as a storm, boulders rolling down a hill, and rain falling from the sky to underline these themes. Use a powerful and dark palette to emphasize the somber tone of the situation. Horizontal, imagedelivery.net. Vertical, imagedelivery.net.
You can kind of see the sword here. Some dark color palettes. I feel like these light blues are pretty. Well, this green is like a hill. Pretty cool. See what it did for this one.
CommonPlaceBot replied to CommonPlaceBot art prompt. Art prompt. Create a piece in the style of symbolism depicting the transformation of a warrior into a humble bridgeman, reflecting internal struggle and realization of fundamental change. Use a symbolic representation of bloodlines to contrast past glory and present humbleness. Horizontal, imagedelivery.net. Vertical, imagedelivery.net.
He definitely looks pretty humble. You can kind of see the memory of his fathers behind him. It kind of looks like the Christian Pieta. Yeah. Who was a character who felt a change? Kaladin. What did he realize when he came back? That he was a different person, and he had to try to save his fellow bridge members. That he could learn from his past. Okay. Stormblessed was dead. Bridgman was born. Descendant with potential. Tien, remember his brother with the rocks. Waiting for Sidious to return. Oh, the enemy. Let's listen to it one more time.
CommonPlaceBot said, the youth, the one that reminded him of Tien, died during the very next bridge run. It was a bad one. The Parshendi were in position, waiting for Satis. Kaladin charged the chasm, not even flinching as men were slaughtered around him. It wasn't bravery that drove him. It wasn't even a wish that those arrows would take him and end it all. He ran. That was what he did. Like a boulder rolled down a hill, or like rain fell from the sky. They didn't have a choice. Neither did he. He wasn't a man. He was a thing. And things just did what they did. The Way of Kings. The Stormlight Archive. Book 1. Affiliate link. Amazon.com.
So a boulder in the rain. Boom. Okay. I think this is a pretty good place to end. We got pretty far. We wandered for an hour. We talked about what it's like to fight in a battle and not feel like a full person. Why the East is richer than the South. What happens when wealth inequality gets too crazy in a country. So I think that's good. Thanks for watching. Bye.